Scooby Dooby Doo, where are you? We've got some reviews to do now. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos. Today we are going to be taking a look at what I believe are sort of celebrated as the 4 best Scooby-Doo movies. So we've got Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island, Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, and Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase. The word or name Scooby-Doo already sounds weird to say. I feel like I've said it too many times. But yeah, so quick spoiler warning for all of those 4 movies. If you haven't seen them, check them out. If you remember seeing them when you were a kid, but you don't fully remember the plot, I highly recommend checking them out because that's pretty much what I did. I was feeling sick this last week and basically just watched all of these while I was trying to get better, and it was really cozy and it was really fun trying to basically compare my childhood memories of these movies to what they are like now, seeing what aged well, what didn't age well, all of that stuff. So yeah, with that said, I think we can just jump right into it. Alright, so as I sort of said in the introduction, I feel like I had seen / half seen all of these when I was a kid. So, when I was a kid, we didn't have streaming, so you would just turn on the TV and sometimes a movie would be partially on and it would have already started and you'd be midway through, but you'd sort of watch it. Then there'd be a ton of commercials breaking it up, and or then your parents would, tell you that you had to turn off the TV and even if you weren't done with the movie, you just had to be done with it, not knowing how it ended, and that's just how it was. And so as a result, I feel like, my whole generation, generations before us and generations after that all kind of dealt with that sort of thing, have sort of a weird relationship with a bunch of movies where they're like strange fragmented memories. I know I sort of had that with Spirited Away, which we discussed earlier on this channel. Feel free to check that video out. So yeah, when I was watching these, it was sort of fun because some of them I immediately remembered the quote-unquote whodunit and the big twists in the movie, and I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that my memory held up that much. And other ones, I felt like I only remembered a few abstract things. So that was very fun going into this, but also these are just sort of delightful movies. They kind of hold up. I feel like even kids today, if they're not familiar with Scooby-Doo, I feel like they would enjoy these if it was, put on the TV. That being said, some of these entries are stronger than others. So I thought it'd be sort of fun if we sort of just go down the line, talk about them, and then I will probably rank them at the end of this video. So these aren't in order of release date or alphabetic or anything. This is just the order it's in. It's not even the order I watched them in. So let's start with The Witch's Ghost. So I really enjoyed this one. This one was one of the ones that I liked more than the others. I thought it was really interesting that they did sort of a fake out with the mystery where, at first there's the mystery of this, sort of spectral ghost of a witch, and you're sort of like, that seems kind of obvious, and then they solve the mystery and you're like, wait, that was exactly what I thought it was going to be. But it's more complicated than that because it's actually sort of a fake out. But let's be honest, the real reason we all love this one is because it has the Hex Girls in it. Very, very, very cool band, and also cool character designs. The Scooby-Doo characters, they're very iconic character designs now because it's such a famous show, and it's just so ingrained in pop culture, etc. But the Hex Girls, their character designs in this movie stand out so much more because their hair sort of has like a gradient, where I think the lead singer's name is Thorn. Like, she has like this wavy redness in her sort of like darker hair color, and they all are like themed on different like sort of like paranormal monsters. You got like a vampire, a werewolf, and Frankenstein's monster. I just feel like they went like way harder than they needed to in terms of character designs, and I thought that was really cool. Something to say in terms of the whole relationship of all of these is it's sort of interesting that in almost all of them, although except for Cyber Chase, I feel like they all involve someone having some level of a romantic interest, which is sort of interesting seeing the Mystery Gang kind of grapple with things like that, and it gives it that sort of extra flair of it being a movie and feels like it's more special than just a long episode. So in The Witch's Ghost, we get a Velma romance through the author, who is a Ravencroft, Narissa Ravencroft mentioned, but he's an author. He writes mystery novels, but he ends up being evil because he's actually a warlock, it turns out, and he wants to find this book so he can get absolute power. Then in Zombie Island, I think it's less so, but Fred kind of has, and also honestly Velma sort of has one with the guy who ends up being a detective. We'll get more into that later. Obviously Scooby-Doo and Shaggy have one in the Alien one. And then, like I said, I don't think Cyber Chase, unless I'm forgetting, has no romance arc or plot line. But yeah, Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, it feels the most Halloween-y because it takes place in, like, basically Salem. I think it's in a made-up town, but it's like a stand-in for Salem where there was witch trials and history of witches, and again, Hex Girls, super cool, and also like the aesthetic of it being a witch makes it feel a bit more like classic Halloween. So it's just super fun, and yeah, I loved that this one, and well, spoiler alert, all of these sort of have like real supernatural aspects to them, because in the show there's not really any it's always an explainable cause for the mysteries. Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island is spoiler alert, this one's the best. It's actually like legitimately kind of scary, not like oh I can't sleep at night, but genuinely, I guess a better word would be sort of eerie. And I remember as a kid it was scary and really creeped me out, because it's like surprisingly kind of dark, and it shows like innocent people getting eaten alive by alligators, and then they become zombies, and through the character design of the zombies you can see it's like, oh, innocent tourists and pirates and like Civil War people, but like, so you can kind of like read between the lines and realize that like, oh, poor vacationers who were just trying to go on like a honeymoon or something were like zapped of and drained of all of their life energy and stuff, so these cat cultists women could survive. So I feel like I've seen other video essays kind of talk about how this one's sort of genuinely creepy. Alien Invaders, I felt like this one was sort of a bit of a letdown in terms of the actual like mystery felt pretty obvious, and I don't know, the alien thing, I don't want to say it felt like forced or something. It just didn't feel as like intriguing as the paranormal supernatural powers of the witches with the Witch's Ghost. It just sort of felt like, well, yep, there's aliens. And I will say though, this one is probably has the best comedy, just because it's very funny seeing Shaggy and Scooby be in love, and there's like a really long like song sequence where Shaggy is singing about dreaming about his future with this girl he met. And so, but something that's interesting about this is in terms of comparing it to my childhood memories, I don't remember Scooby and Shaggy being nearly as annoying. I remember them just being sort of like funny as a kid, and I liked their characters. But like, especially on Zombie Island, they're just constantly messing everything up to a degree that it's almost like exasperating. That like, there's no break in between them messing things up. They like almost drown on the ferry, and then immediately they tear up the entire house's like garden as Scooby chases some cats, and then they immediately mess up the kitchen eating peppers and start screaming, and then they immediately like get knocked over by a mirror, and there's like all this stuff, and so they're just total mess ups where it's agents of chaos. I did not remember it being that way at all, so that was sort of funny and interesting to see how a child would sort of interpret that stuff versus how an adult does. I also didn't really remember how much Scooby was like truly a dog, to the point that it almost felt kind of uncanny in Zombie Island when he starts chasing cats around, because I felt like if someone had come up to me and done one of those TikTok street interviews and they were like, do you think Scooby would chase around cats since, you know, he's a dog? I would have said no. I would have been like, no, he's like too sentient. Like he can speak fluent English. And honestly, he doesn't speak English as well as I remembered, but I remembered him just being able to talk, and I felt like he would, as a result, be too smart to chase a cat, or Shaggy would be able to, you know, communicate with him and be like, hey, don't do that, and Scooby would be able to understand. But no, Scooby is much more of a dog than I remembered, and basically has all of the classic instincts that a dog has, where it just sort of enters hunter mode when seeing cats or smelling food or something. So that was sort of interesting. But yeah, Alien Invaders was probably the biggest letdown in terms of mystery, although Cyber Chase was also like super obvious, because they immediately emphasized that one of the scientists / game developers likes baseball, and then all of the clues are baseball related. So yeah, it's obvious that's him. And I felt like that was... Cyber Chase is interesting because I remember as a kid, I didn't really like Cyber Chase. I felt as a kid that was the weakest one. And as an adult, I also kind of felt this was the weakest one. I kind of felt like once they entered the cyber world, it kind of didn't do enough play. Like they were in this virtual world or on the moon and stuff, but then I don't know, it didn't do anything that like interesting or abstract or creative. Obviously, once they meet like the virtual NPC versions of themselves, that was sort of interesting. But it also felt kind of weirdly, sadly, sort of like funky that they have to like leave the virtual ones in this like abandoned town that doesn't have a ton of NPCs or anything to do, because it's sort of just like they're just going to be living the same day over and over and over again, sort of like a Groundhog's Day thing. I also felt like with the Cyber Chase one, so again, like the mystery was a little too obvious. It was a little funky. Oh, big thing I wanted to talk about though is that it's hilarious to watch this in 2025, because like it starts off where you see all these scientists who are like in lab coats, and you know, they're, I think, like on a college campus, and they're shown to be extremely smart. But then they're just working on like game dev. They're literally just making games. And so it's really funny getting to see what people thought game dev would look like in the 90s. Because yeah, game devs today, believe it or not, they're not working in laboratories with white coats. It was also sort of funny because I felt like the witch's ghost, since it kind of had the most like plausibility, it made sense that a small tourist town would want to try to drum up attention by doing a fake ghost, and then it made sense that Ravencroft would, you know, kind of jump through all these hoops to try to get this book that would give him absolute power. And there was some interesting sort of world building that you had to have some degree of witches or Wiccan's blood to do the spells in it, and that's sort of where the Hex Girls come in. So that one made sense. Zombie Island sort of makes sense in its own way, just because it's sort of like a curse. Although it is a little concerning and a little problematic that it basically confirms that the cat god is real. So, like, canonically within the universe of Scooby-Doo, there is a fully powerful cat god, so be aware of that. Alien Invaders just felt like the most obvious giveaway, and it also kind of felt like, I don't even know if crime needed to happen because they find some gold in the mines, and I felt like they could have handled trying to get that gold a bit better. And also the fact that it sort of was just them trying to mine for gold ultimately felt lamer. Like, one guy's looking for a book that will make it so that he has like superpowers, and the other one's they're just looking for some gold. It's also hilarious in Alien Invaders that they like get this money and they get this gold, and they end up using that money to just like make like this super elaborate fake UFO that like they're burning money using that while also doing crime, and then they don't even get any money. I just thought that was funny, that was the first thing they spent their money on, was like this ginormous stage of a UFO, and that they were also like probing people, because it's heavily implied that the weird kind of painter guy got probed. And then Cyber Chase also doesn't make any sense because, one, it just doesn't sort of understand game development and game design and stuff, but also like they're like, oh no, we invented a ray gun that takes anything from the video game world and, you know, makes it in the real world, and so any sort of virus or like a monster NPC can just come out and then wreak havoc. And it's sort of like, maybe don't invent that. Maybe turn that device off. So yeah, try to think about any other sort of thoughts. You know, Hex Girls were the best part of all of these, but Zombie Island was definitely the most like creepy. Alien Invaders was honestly pretty boring, and Cyber Chase was just way too obvious. So that being said, I think we can I pretty much have revealed it, but let's get our official ranking of these movies. See, so this is sort of tough because I don't know if I want to put Zombie Island or Witch's Ghost first, but solely because there's so much going on in Zombie Island, and it is like eerie, like there are real zombies and all that, I feel like I have to give that the number one place. It's just having a Scooby-Doo one where there's actually like legitimately scary things going on. Yeah, it's got to get number one, which means Witch's Ghost gets number two because that's a Hex Girls. And again, the witchy sort of East Coast vibes, it's just good. It's just prime Scooby-Doo in that way. And then Alien Invaders or Cyber Chase. I don't like Cyber Chase. It doesn't stand out to me. I feel like it's the weakest entry, which means that I have to give Alien Invaders third place, even though I'm also not crazy about that one. So, to the surprise of no one, that is my official ranking. So I'm gonna wrap this up there. You know, these movies, they're short. There's, you know, they're kids movies. So there's not a ton going on in them. So I didn't have as much to say about these as I do with other movies that I'm currently seeing and engaging with. But I hope you had fun, sort of, you know, having a little tea break, maybe a coffee break, and you know, kind of just joining me for this little nostalgia trip. Let me know in the comments if you would rank these differently. I always say this, but I genuinely read all the comments. I genuinely would love to hear from you guys. I don't really have anyone to talk about this stuff with, so I would love to have like some actual discussion and discourse in the comments about what your rankings would be. You know, if I would love to hear specifically, especially from someone who might put Cyber Chase as like number one, and I want to hear why you would put it at number one. But if you're enjoying these, please consider subscribing and hitting the like button. It helps grow the channel, and the more the channel grows, the more we can have discussion in the comments and sort of have, a fun actual community going on with all this stuff. And so, yeah, with all that being said, though, I will see you in the next one. So, bye.